know, one thing that bothers me when I'm ready to go to bed is sometimes I can't think of anything to help me go to sleep. You know, like, I can't think of any good stories to tell, and I don't have my mom to tell me any more stories now. If I only had an uncle like Uncle Mike in the 1986 release of Deadtime stories. This is our video review of the cult classic Deadtime stories, and I hope you will enjoy it. Without further ado, here are the players for this video review.
Hey, this is Cody at Squidflicks.com with a review of Deadtime stories. Came out in 1986 and was directed by Jeffrey Dellman. It's an anthology horror film, which is to say several short stories with a wraparound story that kind of ties them together. Well, this one's about an uncle who's trying to put his nephew to bed. His uncle's trying to watch some like nude pageant on TV or something, but his nephew won't let him go to sleep until he hears a bedtime story. So he decides to tell him these really disturbing, twisted versions of these classic fairy tales. The first one has to deal with these two sisters who are witches. They're trying to bring back their other sister who's been dead for a while, and you know they have to like gather ingredients in bad ways and stuff like that. I don't know, I thought it was really funny. It had some good one-liners, and the relationship between the two sisters I thought was really good. They were both good actors. The second story is Little Red Riding Hood, where Little Red Riding Hood has to go to the pharmacy to get her grandma's drugs, but she ends up getting the wrong drugs, and the wolf character is also at the pharmacy, and she ends up getting his drugs, so he ends up chasing after her, and as he's chasing her, you wonder, you think he's just a drug addict or something, but then night falls, and he actually transforms into a werewolf, which is why he needed the pills in the first place. So I thought that was a good take on the story. It was probably my favorite of the three, just because it was darker, didn't have as many jokes, and it actually worked, I thought. But the third story is definitely the funniest, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Goldilocks is like this Carrie-type character where she has telekinetic powers, and she's a serial killer, and the police are after her, so she takes, shelter in the Three Bears' house. The Three Bears are like this family of bank robbers. Mama Bear is like the grandma from the Goonies or something. She's just this crotchety old lady. Papa Bear is this greasy, nerdy guy who's definitely the funniest character in the entire film. And Baby Bear is this man-child, this huge, mentally handicapped guy. And Goldilocks actually has sex with him. Which is kind of disturbing, but it made me laugh quite a bit also. But yeah, it's a solid anthology. I mean, there's not too many really good anthologies, or too many anthologies, period. But, I mean, if it's between this or like Trapped Ashes, I would definitely say go with this one.
Alright, we just got done watching Deadtime Stories, a 1986 film, anthology film. It, overall, I think it was a fairly decent film. It wasn't, about this boy who can't sleep, and he calls upon his Uncle Mike, I think is his name, to come and tell him stories to help him go to sleep. And it just so happens that these stories are some on the demented side, and they, I thought Uncle Mike humor was very funny, and the wraparound segment and all was all very comedic, and the acting was over the top, which was good for the comedic horror anthology style. The first story was probably the weakest in my view, in my opinion. I just didn't really get into it. I thought it was kind of boring and lame. It picks up with the second one about play on Little Red Riding Hood, kind of more of a modern theme, and it had werewolves in it, and it was very, very cool, I thought. And to me, the most creative story of the bunch was number 3, which is play on Goldilocks and the Three Bears. It was very different, but it worked, it worked, and it was fun to watch. That was the most comedic piece And considering this was a low budget film, it has to rely heavily on the story and what it's trying to relate to the audience, and it did a very good job, at least with me, picking out what was to be taken seriously and what was to be taken on a more comedic aspect. But overall, I give this a 3 out of 5, just because the stories, except for the first one, are very original and entertaining. So, definitely, if this had a bigger budget, I think it would be a cult classic.
Okay, so my take on Deadtime stories was overall, yeah, I thought it was pretty decent for an anthology. I really liked the spin, or kind of the twist on a couple of the traditional fairy tales. The second segment was a spin on the Little Red Riding Hood, which involved some werewolves and just, a little bit, different than your normal Little Red Riding Hood tale. And then the third segment, which I think was my favorite, was Goldilocks and the Three Little Bears. And I thought it was pretty ingenious to make the bear family was a bunch of psychos. They weren't actually literally bears; they were people. And Goldilocks having her own psychotic tendencies too. That was pretty interesting. I thought that the weakest segment was the first one with the evil witches. I didn't really understand the point of it. It was kind of just a fairy tale. But the shortest one was the second segment, and that was the Little Red Riding Hood segment. Overall, I'd give this a 3 out of 5, which is just the regular Squid rating. It'd definitely be worth checking out. You can watch it online. Finding it online is not a problem. VHS is pretty common to find, and so is the DVD. So it's worth watching. I'd give it a watch, but it may not be worth repeat viewings. It's just kind of one of those random things to check out and then never look at it again. But that's my take on it. So just give it a try. Alright.